All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Power to Fly Chat and Learn Ambassador Edition. My name is Liang Chung, and I recently just got certified as a Power to Fly ambassador. So super excited about that. And here I am hosting my first event through this platform. So I have a lovely guest today who is joining us, and she is a familiar face to Power to Fly because she is part of the Power to Fly team. So let's welcome Mariella Marie to the stage. And
Thank you. And thank you for this is an honor that it's your first ambassador chat that you're hosting. And I love that we can consistently come together, you and I, to either interview one or the other. And we kind of change seats at the table. So thank you for having me on.
Same here. Yeah, it's such an honor to have you as a first guest, and it's very comforting for me. So I appreciate it. So before we get started, I'm just going to share my screen quickly just to go over some housekeeping before we kick off this chat and hear from Mariella about this amazing topic. So just hang on one second while I do this. Okay, so you should see the housekeeping slides. So just wanted to share with everybody. We love and really appreciate your full engagement in this conversation. We want to keep it a conversation. We want to keep it a dialogue. So please feel free to. Oh, actually, this platform doesn't allow you to turn your camera on, but if you would like to join us and turn your camera on and show your face, please just put a +1 in the chat, and then that will let me know to give you rights or permission to be in presenter mode, and then you can turn your camera on and then come off mute to join into the conversation live. Otherwise, feel free to just submit your questions in the chat, and we're happy to answer those questions. And, just to let you know, if you do show your face in presenter mode, that this is a live recording and that your face will be seen in the recording. So just wanted to put that disclaimer out there that you're aware. However, the chats will not be recorded. They'll remain, anonymous or private to this session only. And after this event, the recording will be available. So you will receive an email with a link to this recording if you're interested in rewatching it to take additional notes or just to enjoy the chat and discussion again. And then, if you love what you see, if you love what you're hearing, please, tag us on social. So we're at PowerToFly, and most definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel as well if you want to check out this chat or any of the other chats that we've had in the past. So now, without further ado, I'm going to welcome Mariella Marie to the stage. I'm going to stop sharing this so that she can provide her own background and bio with all of you.
Hey, beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful introduction. And I see we've already got some folks who want to come and join us by dropping that +1. I love that. We're getting onto a new platform. So this is so great that I get to be on the other side of the table. So Liang, I see you. I feel you. I'm here. I'm ready to I mean, this hour is going to fly by, I know. So to introduce myself, some of you all may know me. I have the pleasure of having these interviews on Power to Fly throughout the week with brilliant women, picking their minds. And I love to try to bring us back to the importance of emotional intelligence whenever I can. I am pretty much obsessed with speaking about emotional intelligence, and hopefully by the end of this chat, you'll learn why. And then maybe, we can work together on developing our emotional intelligence. So just to, throw that out there, that's what I do with Power to Fly. And then I also have a project that I am working on that is called the Positive Force Team. And we are actually relaunching the Positive Force team to show and to share great content starting next month. I actually had a beautiful interview with Liang on the radio. So I'm the creative director, and I curate counterculture digital media so that we can just, think more about the B side of history, actively participate in creating the story that we're leaving behind while using emotional intelligence. So I create virtual events there, content to just kind of talk about these cultural taboos, the underheard, unpopular kind of things that are being shared on the media. So hot topics, activating the B side of history. And I curate content as the creative director just to remind folks that we are here and we need to mindfully craft history together through storytelling and global participation. So I basically want folks to, decolonize the mind and, work on organizing a more sustainable lifestyle. So that's me in a nutshell.
Love it, love it, love it. And it's such beautiful work that you're doing, and so excited about this radio station that you're working on. So you're going to be able to tune into Mariella, all times of the day to check out, what's in store in terms of, who her whole self is. And I'm just excited about this project. I think it's going to be amazing. Yay. So we have this wonderful topic. If you want to, would you like to kick it off and lead us into it? And then I'll share the first question that we have for you.
Yeah, we can roll right into the questions. Actually, I think that's a great way to start the topic. Yeah,
perfect. So the very first question I have here is, I'm excited to hear what you have in store for us in terms of how to identify and rank the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. Can you share what they are, how to identify them, and your perspective on how or why we should rank them?
Absolutely. And I just want to start off by saying, first, I am not giving any kind of medical advice to anyone. Actually, I consider myself an artist, and I believe that we're all creative beings. I'll dive into that a little more later. But I'm simply inviting you to think about where you fall on the EI spectrum. And how you can develop your emotional intelligence in creative and provocative ways so that your lifestyle can be radically transformed. And in turn, I really believe in that trickle effect, in turn, radically transforming and enhancing the way we live and work together in this shared human experience. So I really hope that emotional intelligence, by creative and provocative way, can be the glue that we need to just piece together, everything that has fallen apart up until now. And I hope that my hope really lies in the artist. And I mean, this is pretty debatable. Actually, I debate with my sister-in-law on this a lot, that I believe that we're all artists. I believe that we're all creative beings. I believe that we are born with the potential to create and be artists, but we are through, through our education systems, through, the way that our communities are kind of assimilate to different cultures and our modern industrialized, hyper-industrialized societies, we become numb, right? So we expect less. We have toxic shit in everything. We learn only one side of history. Social media is also a part of just kind of like getting us into this way of thinking and seeing ourselves, what does beauty mean? What does a standard of beauty mean? And taking that based on what we're taught instead of how we feel and truly expressing ourselves. So my hope is that, you walk away reigniting that artist within you by, participating more in your emotional intelligence at work, at home, and at home, at work, and at play. So that, we can really just get out of this linear way of thinking, really bridge, right brain, left brain, and kind of roll into a brighter future, if you will. So what is emotional intelligence? I'll start by saying what it is not. Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing emotions. It's about learning how to recognize, process, and channel them in a way that benefits you and in certain cases, your team. So I'm going to try to simultaneously speak about like how you can make this work for you and how you can make this work, for your team if you are in a work setting. Because we often say here at PowerToFly, you can't talk about the professional without talking about the personal. So I want to give you some tips and tricks to work on personally, and then also bring some things to your team. So emotional intelligence, when practiced, is about creating healthy family and interpersonal dynamics, balancing physical and emotional health, identifying your purpose or re-identifying your purpose, defining success on your own terms, and shaping a healthy work environment by being globally aware. So there are 5 known pillars, I should say, because the beautiful thing about emotional intelligence as well is that there has not been a lot of research yet in comparison to, like, let's say, IQ. or other kinds of, other types of ways that we measure our quote unquote success, and the way that we can be, socially aware or socially responsible. So there are 5 pillars that I'll go over right now. And I hope that, as over time, we can kind of maybe develop these more and add more, as we grow into learning more about emotional intelligence. So we have self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, and social awareness, or people skills. So I just want to kind of speak to the live audience now. I would love to hear you all rate yourselves just right now. Maybe you don't know a lot about emotional intelligence. Of course, I'm going to dive in deeper in a minute, but where do you feel like you are on the spectrum? Let's say from 1 to 10. So let's start all together. Whoever wants to answer, of course, this is not mandatory, but let's start with self-awareness. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, where do you think you fall? If you can just intuitively respond to this, where do you think you fall on that scale with self-awareness? So I'll just give folks a moment to write in the chat box. All right, so you want to read some of these, Liang?
Yeah, so we got some 7s, 6, 1 person's between an 8 or a 9. And we have a question: could you define what self-awareness means to you?
Right. So this is great. Thank you for that question. For me, self-awareness is about introspection. So it deals with going in and being contemplating and observing your sensations. You're in touch with your essential awareness, which is very important, because then you have your intuition comes into play, your boundaries come into play, because you're aware of what are your limits. And so introspection, and then that breeds confidence. So you have with self-awareness, for me, it has to do with introspection and confidence. So self-aware people understand and their impact on the external experience of others. So I'm happy to see that we've got some 6, 7s, 8s, and 9s here. And that makes me happy. Let's move on to the next one. So self-regulation. So before I define what self-regulation is for me, I know that there are probably some other definitions out there as well, but can you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest? Self-regulation, just intuitively, how would you rate your ability to self-regulate? All right.
Okay, so we got the answers are trickling in. We got a 7.5, 7 or 8, 5, especially during the pandemic. Oh, that's a good disclaimer right there. Yep.
Great. Okay, great. So a person with high EI can healthily express their emotions with restraint and control. So self-regulation is about, I love this quote actually that Audre Lorde wrote about feelings. So our feelings are our most genuine paths to knowledge. So again, all of these are interconnected, right? When you have more awareness of your feelings and your self-knowledge, you are more self-aware. That kind of leads back to the first one. There's another quote that I like that has to do with this. Feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go. That is by Muji. So again, the ability to observe and not react and respond and in a way that you are either suppressing something or resisting something in an unhealthy way. And of course, right now during the pandemic, as we know, it's really challenging to exercise all of these. So hopefully by the end of this chat, we can be more confident in, practicing a little more on easing into that, developing, so we can get those numbers a little higher. All right. So what about motivation? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself about, your ability to self-motivate? All right. Awesome.
So we're seeing some higher numbers here. Got a 10, 8, 6.5, 6 during pandemic, 8 usually.
Great.
And I'd love to talk about that, Mariella, in terms of like the shifts that we go through as we're encountering different types of experiences, because I'm sure that that has an impact, right, on how, how we demonstrate, all of these different aspects, right, of emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. I think so. The only thing constant in life is change. I would like to bring that proverb that I'm sure is written somewhere. But I really believe that is true. The only thing constant is change. Like that's one thing we can rely on. Change is happening in every moment. I mean, from a biological perspective to, a mental perspective, physical perspective, social perspective. So things are changing all the time. So I think in order to be, to ride the waves of change, it's great to have some anchors, right? So checking in with yourself, what is your self-care ritual like? Does it exist? Is it non-existent? How does it fluctuate during times like, let's say, a global pandemic? Of course, we are not perfect beings, but I think that when you can have anchors in your life, whether that be through, your community or, your alone time. Well, in a minute, we'll talk about loneliness and aloneness, the difference between the two. But if you can really, use those anchors to keep you grounded as you ride the waves of change. So I know that, of course, the pandemic is bringing a lot of things to the surface. And I think that it's better to acknowledge all of the fluctuating feelings that may arise versus, trying to suppress them or, actually it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone who says, she felt like everyone on social media was like extra creative and extra motivated. And she felt like she had to like be creating things all the time and how that can also be exhausting. So maybe it's okay that we rate ourselves high, let's say with self-motivation, but then how do we balance that with, taking time to make sure that we're not toxic motivation, Amanda writes, totally probably true. I mean, just from having that conversation with her, it seems counterintuitive, but it happens. And I think it's all about balance. So to answer your question, Liang, I think it's about putting anchors into our lives, no matter what comes. We can fall back on those anchors and try not to get lost in the sauce. We can ride the waves of change by, being a little more balanced with, how we are practicing self-awareness or how we're practicing self-regulation. And then I'd love to move on to the next one, which is empathy. So number 4, the 4th pillar is empathy. How would you rate your empathy right now on a scale from 1 to 10? Just use your intuition, intuitively answer, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. Your empathy. Great. Awesome. Okay, so we got some numbers.
9s, I have a few 9s, I have an 8, 10, but I'm not sure that's good for me. Ooh. Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, and I think Andrea wanted to hop off of come on camera with us, so maybe you can share your voice and let us know. I love the transparency there as well.
And I love your artwork, Andrea. Beautiful. Yes.
Thanks so much. Actually, those are paint by numbers. So I've been doing that during the pandemic, and so it's really been fun. As far as the 10 being maybe not so healthy is, I think, especially during these times when there's so much hurt and pain in the world, and my friends and my family and even the people who haven't lost jobs or haven't gotten sick, there's so much heaviness right now. And I think when you're especially empathetic about that, it can really drag your own self down. And it's kind of like you have to, maybe that's part of the self-regulation is making sure that you're not taking it on. It's good to be empathetic and kind, but maybe not hurting with everybody. And I think that's part of the heaviness of this time too, is if you are super empathetic, it's maybe not very healthy.
Absolutely. First of all, you look beautiful. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, 1,000% agree with you. I think you answered your own reflection, or you responded to your own reflection by saying, yeah, it's about that balance, right? So if we say, like, just to take the analogy of riding the wave and surfing the wave, if we dive into that wave and go underwater, you know, we are not made to live underwater. We get overwhelmed. We can't breathe. We're absorbing all of the, you know, things around us instead of finding that balance on by surfing that wave. So I promise I didn't have this wave surfing analogy come up, but I think it's really timely, and I think it really hits on what you're saying. Balance is key. Balance is key, and then those anchors are key. So while it may be, I mean, this is interesting to talk about because actually, as I mentioned before, there's not much research on emotional intelligence testing, let's say. Like you can go and find quizzes online. You can test yourself. But I think my recommendation would be to experiment yourself, and to maybe, like as we're doing now, we're kind of intuitively saying, you know, where do I fall on the spectrum? And then maybe set some time in your calendar for, like, I don't know, a couple weeks, and like check in, you know, do your self-care check in and say, okay, well, where am I now with all of these, with all 5 pillars, and to see if there is fluctuation. Also with women, we have our mooning cycle. So of course, you know, there are different times that we're going to feel, you know, more self-aware or not, depending on where we are in our mooning cycle, if that is regular, if that is not, what's happening in the world. So we have all of these, you know, outside factors that can trigger certain things. So that balance is key, because if we are sharing empathy, if we're doing it, if we're going over, but we're having less self-regulation, we're not setting those boundaries, then we're hurting ourselves potentially. So thank you for sharing that part of your journey. I love that you're painting by numbers. That's beautiful. Can I ask you why you started to paint by numbers?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, and I couldn't go anywhere, do anything, so I started with puzzles. And then I ran out of puzzles, and the store ran out of the puzzle. And so I thought, what else can I do? I've done, I think I'm on my 18th one now, you guys. But
That's
it's really
awesome.
fun, and it brings me joy, and it is part of that motivation thing, because I've lost motivation for some of the other things in my life that I had before the pandemic. But it's shifted, and it's that creative outlet, like you said, Mary. And also the other really great thing is, while I do paint by numbers, I listen to audiobooks, and I try to make sure and listen to really, like the one I just finished was really interesting and historic and helpful. And I try to learn about women in other countries, and, you know, not just fluff. And sometimes fluff is fun, and that's great, but it puts me in, so I can almost remember what I was listening to when I did that painting and what I was listening to do when I did that one. And it brings back memories, which can be nice and fun too.
I love that. Oh, good. Okay, so I hope that, I mean, you've
Beautiful.
inspired me for sure. And Leanne, you look inspired as well. Did you want to see?
Yeah.
You also have artwork on the back of your
I do. I have I definitely, I completely agree with you. I think there's an artist in all of us. There's some, you know, ounce of creativity somewhere. And I do, you know, I subscribe to that, thinking that sometimes the way that we're brought up, or society squashes that, right? To a certain, you know, degree. And so I think it's a matter of, the intention, right, of reconnecting with that aspect of ourselves. And that's what I really enjoyed about your story, because it was you trying to, you know, connect with the inside artist in you, right, by doing paint by numbers. But it's also listening to this art, you know, these audiobooks, which is another form of art, right, in itself. So you're exploring, you know, multiple mediums of it.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So good. So good. Okay, so let's move on to the 5th pillar. So social awareness, people skills. Where do you all rate yourselves from 1 to 10 intuitively? 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. How would you rate yourself as far as people skills, social awareness is concerned? All right. And I love that folks are putting, you know, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, because yeah, things are changing for sure. And I feel like you know, of course, things are changing. How are we riding the wave of change? Everything that happened before the pandemic seems like to be like zapped into a short amount of time.
Right.
All right, what we got?
So we got some 8s, pre-pandemic 8, during the pandemic 6. fluctuating between 7 and 9, depending on what I'm doing. And then we also want to acknowledge, Amanda wrote, I associate what audio book or podcast is I was listening to with certain plants in my garden, like you, Andrea, with your paintings. That's cool.
Love it. I love it. We got some creative minds. We got some on the call. Okay, great. So those are the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. So I want to dive in a little more, on, especially on the social awareness, because that gets into more of like, this isolation pandemic that we're seeing today. So we can move on to the next question if you'd like.
Let's do it. So let me just pop into, okay, so the next question is, why is this topic on emotional intelligence and the loneliness epidemic so important to you?
Great. So I spoke a little bit about just how, in my opinion, I would argue that we've become numb as a species. I'm talking about Homo sapiens, not just like people from the States, not just like Black people from the States, not just like queer Black people from the States. I'm talking about people in the world, especially like during modern times, because, well, we can talk about, the Industrial Revolution, the technological revolution, how that has warped the way that we eat food and our connection to how we grow our food and cook our food or not, how we connect with folks online or offline. I think that our creative power has been, like how you said before, Leanne, kind of squashed, or as I like to say, numb. And so it's easy to fall into these like, okay, how can I entertain myself, right? Or how can I connect? And then you just, you end up just, is this connecting? Does that make you feel like you are generating more creative power and urgency? I feel like, so we kind of have to either redefine or recharge our creative power in order to not fall into this loneliness. I would say like this dark hole of loneliness. And again, I'm not giving anyone any medical advice. Of course, if you are going through depression or if you have some sort of, mental challenges that you're working with, and I would also argue that a lot of us in the world are working on that, whether we want to say that we are, just the way that our society, our modern culture has raised us. Racism, for example, for me is a huge mental problem. We all need to speak to someone, whether that be, allies or therapists or friends, but anyway, I digress. So the fact that our creative power is not charged, I feel like that kind of like gets us into this wormhole of loneliness. And there is a difference between loneliness and aloneness. I believe that aloneness is a great thing. To be alone, to be in solitude, to be with yourself, to feel yourself, to experience your senses, to give your time and to give yourself the time and space to get to know yourself, so that you don't, 50 years later, you're like, well, where did I go? Or you're not proud of who you are or how you look. Well, how much time have you actively participated in solitude? And one of the things that I like to do is I like to contemplate. And I know that sounds like, well, I don't have time to contemplate, or like that sounds like woo-wooey or whatever. But if I can set some time in my day to contemplate, and if you have the luxury to take a whole day, I was introduced we were roommates for a while, she's originally from Colorado. We were roommates for a while in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and she would say, I'm going to have a contemplation day tomorrow. I just want you to know, which means, and she set up her rules, like she doesn't speak to anyone. She lets everyone know she's not going to be available. Like things are fine. I'm safe, but like, I'm not going to be on my emails. I'm not going to be on my text messages. I'm not going to be on socials. And she gives herself that day. And if you can't give yourself a day, because I know that is a big privilege, at least a couple moments in your day to practice contemplation, because you get to be more connected with yourself and with your creative essence. And I think that you will go to work better. You will go to your family better. You'll participate in your community in a way that is more holistic. So transforming loneliness to aloneness is something I would like to propose. Don't be afraid of solitude. Explore the power of solitude. And if solitude frightens you, then maybe ask yourself why. Why does solitude frighten you? And then don't be afraid to write that down and share it with whoever you want to share it with or not. We are social beings, and this pandemic has challenged us to remain isolated. And technology claims to bring us together through social medias and things like that, but I would argue that it's doing the opposite. I think that it can become really overwhelming to see all of the crazy things that are going on in the world, and then come back and be by yourself, and then you have the same walls that are around you as 5 months, 10 months now. And what do you do with that? Mm-hmm. So transforming loneliness to aloneness. I think that, there are some tips that I would like to propose. One of them, the major thing is have some tech off days, respect that for yourself, get off of tech, less screen time, and be empower yourself. You're not missing out on anything. Don't take your phone to the toilet. That's something that seems really silly to say, but I see people doing it all the time. I used to do it all the time. I have to even force myself to, oh shoot, I'm doing it. I have to put it out of the room. Okay, can I get a little grotesque right now?
No, it's totally
releasing your bodily. Okay, but let me just say, releasing your bodily fluids. It's you need to experience that. You need to be fully present. You need to be checking your email. I don't know if you all ever saw the. I know. Well, I'm just trying to figure out.
It makes me think about when you put your phone in front of your face and you ask us, "Is this connected?" That was a very powerful image, because I stopped and paused and I saw the phone in front of you, and I was like, no, that is not, being connected. Right. And so, to just kind of have bring that conversation full circle, right. To what you're saying is, I think about, where do we draw the boundaries? Right. In terms of, when we open ourselves up, right. To be connected in that form, right. Or to, experience or be fully present, right, in something that we're doing, for ourselves, right, and for our health. That's the way that I view it. I love that suggestion. It is, it's something, it makes me think. A friend of mine, she is an entrepreneur, and she actually will set a message, an automated message that says, I'm having my monk day, so I'm not going to respond to emails until this date. She makes it really clear with people that, this is her time out and this is what she's doing and how she's embracing it. And there's something really admirable about that.
And I really feel I love that. And I really believe that we can reshape the way that we work, especially now that everything is broken. It's if you really need that time to contemplate, or that time to have your no tech, low tech day, just set everyone up for success. Hey, I'm probably not going to write back for this time, or I only check and I'm working on this because I have this resistance to social media because, from after working in social media for so long, it's I don't want anything to do with it. And then I see just how overwhelming it can be. So, but I do recognize the power that it can also manifest and create with the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. So I do try to engage, but I think that we can totally reshape the way that we work, not just by following into those patterns. This is also, in my opinion, a part of practicing emotional intelligence. Don't fall into the pattern. Don't just take what people say as a given. Let's not do the same thing that our parents and our grandparents and great grandparents did. Let's do something different, and let's reshape that. And we can totally reshape the way that we work, especially that things are on more remote right now for a lot of folks. And we can do that. So I don't know, throw some suggestions in the chat box. How have you been reshaping the way that you work, or you're interviewing, or you're showing up for your family? I think that now's a big time to experiment. I think that we have some wiggle room to do that. So let's do it.
Yeah, and I love this note here from Andrea. She says, I wonder if when things open up and we're able to see people safely again, will we perhaps appreciate what we lost for so long and see folks interacting with each other more than being on their phones when together? I love that. I hope so too. Yes.
What do you think? Yeah, what do you think, Liang? And what do you think, Andrea?
I think so. I think that people are starting, I was moderating a panel this past weekend for International Women's Day, and we were talking about this, how the pandemic has shifted our perspective, right, on who is important to us and what meaningful relationships and meaningful connections really mean to us, and taking the conscious time, right, to be fully present when we are connected with that person, right, who means so much to us. So I do think that it has shifted that, and that really has become the silver lining in all of this.
I agree. And I would say, even also to tag on to what you said just a minute ago, Marielle, about how we work. When I was working, I didn't used to put my camera on at all. I was like, I didn't do my makeup. I don't care. I'm not going to do it. And now any chance that I get to do some sort of training where they have a video on or whatever, it makes me feel more of a participant. I've realized when I have my camera on, and I look forward to it more, and it makes me feel like people are actually there, even though if I don't have my camera on, it's the same interaction to a certain extent, but it makes me feel more of a participant. And so I figure I'm going to keep that up after the pandemic. I wasn't really one that if I went out to lunch with you, I would ever check my phone, but I think that each of us have little things that we did before that we didn't even realize how controlling there were. And so I do think this pandemic could have given us this silver lining of stretching away from that and embracing each other more in whatever way that means, when things open up again. I hope so.
I have to hope so too. I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, but there are a lot of ignorant folks around, and I just like, and I think just we like comfort as Homo sapiens, right? We like comfort. So we fall back into what's comfortable or what we know. So I just have to hope that we don't fall back into those bad patterns. I shouldn't say bad, but those like unhealthy patterns of like, not being present with yourself, or not being present with the people around you. And they just, go back to, old familiar things, as Amanda was saying. So, I have to hope, but I have this, I don't want to call it pessimistic, but this realistic side that's like, there are a lot of people that just are waiting for things to go back to normal, like that makes me afraid. What is normal? And that was the norm for who? For one kind of person, or a couple of kinds of, one lifestyle, let's say. But I digress.
It's actually, that point is a good segue to the next question, Mariella, which is, there's so much going on in the world that's forcing us to address uncomfortable or previously taboo topics such as racism, sexism, and belonging. How can we apply emotional intelligence practices, right, as we unpack issues at work or personally? And this is one that's really resonating with me right now, because it was an event that took place yesterday in Atlanta, where, there was a mass shooting, where, 6 people died, and it was, these Asian massage parlors that were targeted. And so that hurt me, that was something that, if I continue to hear about all these, crimes, right, and it's, hasn't been determined what the motives are, but still has such an emotional impact, right? So how can we leverage these practices, right, in a way where it's productive, and it helps to guide us towards a place of progress and a place of understanding and being empathetic?
Yeah, as I said before, change is constant. And unfortunately, with that change, these huge crimes against humanity, crimes against, Mother Nature, it will continue to happen. So thank you for sharing your experience and being transparent about that, Liang. I'm sure that, the more we talk about these kinds of things, the more they won't be normalized, and we can realize like, hey, yeah, this is not okay. But again, falling back on those anchors. And so, part of practicing that social awareness is, what can we do? How can we not just like scroll to the next story? Or how can we not just, let it eat us up, and then, well, we're putting ourselves on fire. We feel like we're drowning, and then we can't do anything to help counteract the destruction that's going on. So I believe that, engaging in emotional intelligence in these ways. Let's say I'm going to try to bring some personal tips that can happen, and also like bring it to your team. So tips that you can bring to your team as well. So let's say, to go back to the first pillar, self-awareness, journaling is beautiful. And I don't know if, I mean, I know that, I guess it's also some certain education systems are to blame for like making people dread writing, getting that big fat red mark on like, this is wrong. I remember having a teacher that says, I'm not going to use red. I'm going to use purple or blue, because red just like, it just had this reaction for students at the time. They're like, oh yeah. And they didn't want to touch the pen. They didn't want to touch the paper because they were afraid of getting that red mark. So anyway, I'm sure there's some sort of psychological connection there, but journaling is beautiful, and you can journal for your eyes only. And I would totally recommend journaling outside of the computer, outside of your phone. Do old fashioned, pick up some paper and pen, and journal. Like I said, for your eyes only. I recommend The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. She has like the first chapter in her book speaks about a phenomenal practice that's called the morning pages. And what happens is you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you just mind dump. You write down at least 3 pages, freehand. And if you don't know what to say, you just say, I don't know what to say. I still don't know what to say. I had a dream last night that was weird. This coffee is kind of cold, and then whatever, you just like free write. It doesn't need to be like an epic novel that you need to share with, this Warner Brothers, write for yourself. And then don't reread it. And then maybe like 3 months later, you reread it and you get to kind of like, peek behind the curtain on what was in your mind, and how you can just like work through and process some of the things without just like diving into like work first thing, or diving into like, being with your kids. Like, wake up a little early if you can, and journal. So that's on a personal level, on like practicing self-awareness. If you want to practice self-awareness with your team at work, which I highly suggest doing that, maybe I would suggest having some birds of a feather breakout groups where maybe you have some writing prompts. So this would be journaling that you share with your team. And so maybe some creative writing prompts could be, what would my ideal day look like? What is one thing you've always wanted to try that you haven't? What is the story I'm telling myself right now? What qualities am I grateful to embody? What's my biggest regret? What's my biggest fear? I am my most authentic self when What is one past event that I previously perceived as a failure and now perceive as a gift? How can I listen to my body on a more regular basis? So again, and I would also just invite the team to come up with some of these prompts too, so that it is, actively engaging everyone, and it's not just someone deciding all of the prompts. Like, folks can have their chance as well to pick certain prompts. But I think that would be interesting to have these like birds of a feather breakout groups, instead of, having a 10-minute check-in before getting into work and saying, okay, let's talk about this writing prompt. And then you get to learn a little bit about each other. You get to express a different part of yourself that maybe you would not have otherwise at work. And then hopefully that will help you build a better product and help you build, more teamwork, collaboration, being more creative. Films are also a great way to do that. I have a film club that we're launching next month on the Positive Force team, where, I want to dive into certain things. So let's say that you pick any film that, for now, I'm going to, because I just recently watched the trial of the Chicago 7, based on a true story. Timely, right? Things like this are still going on now. For those of you who don't know, the trial of the Chicago 7 is about a group of protesters who were arrested for inciting a riot in Chicago, like, I don't know, during I want to say 70s, but I'm not sure, maybe 60s, but if anyone can correct me on that. But anyway, very near, in the distant recent past. So maybe a prompt could be, like, watch the film together. Cool. And we're going to take 10 minutes as a team before we dive into work to talk about a writing prompt. Maybe the prompt is, which character do you identify with the most and why? Or, if you could co-write this film with Aaron Sorkin, how would you add your voice to the script? Is there anything you change, develop the storyline even further, new endings, new beginnings? And that's fun, that's creative. And you get to practice a little bit of, learning your self-awareness by watching a film. That's pretty timely. Lots of folks are watching films these days because of the pandemic. So let's bring that to the workplace and talk about these really chewy topics. I know that a question later on is how can we talk about these chewy topics? This is a great way to do that, to bring to the team, right? So also practicing empathy, which is one of the pillars. So just to use this film prompt again for practicing empathy as a team. So let's say if you were on the jury, because also in this time where, now I think it was before the 70s, but I think it was the 70s because the Black Panther Party, I'm just thinking of like the clothes that they wore, rings 70s era. So I think it was the 70s. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. So let's say, there was a jury that was completely, selected to basically, do I don't know, just, how the system is in the States. Anyway, so let's say that you were on the jury. How would you recognize Bobby Seale's participation? And Bobby Seale was a political activist and author, co-founder of the Black Party in the US. That would bring up some interesting topics, right? And then maybe you can talk about what's currently going on in the world, within racism, but like through film, right? To just bring up some empathy or just some self-awareness or social awareness. So I know I'm jumping to one of the questions because I see we're running out of time, but one of the questions that you all submitted had to do with like, how can we undress and unpack some of these big social taboos without making us uncomfortable, like racism, sexism, belonging, using emotional intelligence. Have a film club and start a writing prompt. And, that really lightens up the heaviness that a lot of these topics bring to the table. And also a lot of folks are watching films these days.
I really like that suggestion. So I'm going to definitely steal that idea and incorporate that with my cousins because we meet on a weekly basis. I like that idea of, and those are some really fantastic questions to prompt the group because there's something about one, it's based on real life, right? It's film, right? So people view it as a form of entertainment, right? But you're utilizing it as a form of education. And then the discussion is bringing it back to the individual, right? And the group and how you feel. So I think I think it can be a really effective format, right? To have those uncomfortable dialogues, right? About topics that are taboo or things that, I think it's easier to say, if I were a juror, this is what I would do, because you're still in that, I think when you're having that conversation, you're thinking about the film, right? But I think it's a really great lead in to sharing your perspective, right? In, a less confrontational way. I don't know if I'm using the right word.
Right. And then practicing empathy. So if someone wants to send Bobby Seale to jail, instead of condemning them, like realize that this is the kind of person you have on the team. And if you value the work that they do, how can we all learn from each other? Because we're sharing the same space, we're sharing the same world. So I think that would be a challenge for someone who might not agree, with that other person and then, that would be also a time to practice, how to resolve conflict in the workplace. Let's say, I know that folks don't necessarily want to deal with this kind of thing, but the reality is we walk out of our offices or our home offices and we're confronted with that on a daily basis. So, I would argue that, again, one of the next questions is how do we implement that on the team? Like, how do we get to like show that it's important to spend time to do these kinds of things? Advocacy is so important. It requires effort and sustained practice. Last year, with all of the police brutality killings, I started a mini series called The Black Experience and demystifying the Black experience here on PowerToFly. So I encourage folks to rewatch those. And one of the things I kept finding myself that I found myself that I was repeating is like, hey, there's no button to end racism. It takes work. You can't push a button and end it. It takes work. You have to like schedule some time in your life to have some like conversations with yourself and with people. So I would argue as well with emotional intelligence to advocate for time to develop that as a team, because I think the worst case scenario is that you have a bunch of programmers and developers, and people creating technology that have very low, that rate themselves very low or are, realistically low in all of the pillars of emotional intelligence. And then everyone is behind all of these devices. And then, whoa, what's happening? How is that's influencing our future in a very slick way that, yeah, it might not be important. They're taking our data, they're whatever, they're figuring out how to get my attention. But like, at the end of the day, I think that it could be more damaging. And so I remember speaking in San Francisco a couple years ago about the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace, and like a room full of developers and programmers and CEOs and business folks. And people were just like looking at me like, mouths were like, eyes were just kind of like, yeah, dude, you got to get out from behind your computer and go be social or go sit with yourself in the dark if you want, but don't be afraid of that solitude, and have some contemplation time, have some no tech, low tech days. So not to be like pushy about that, but I really think that it's important to create the space for that in your life and in your teamwork. And then also so that you'll find that more storytelling will come up, right? Like diverse voices will be heard. We'll get to, figure out how to move forward together instead of, one person thinking that they need to find the solution and find the button that ends sexism or, it's just like unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot there. That is a courageous conversation to sit in a room full of people and bring that up. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience who agree with you, and we're uncomfortable, right, sharing it because it is a radical idea. It's a radical idea if you are part of this industry, right? Or your livelihood is attached to it. But I think you raise a lot of really strong points there. And I do want to acknowledge that, we have a comment here that I think, or a follow-up question here. It's really, really good question. We know the personal is political and the political is personal and the professional is personal. But how do you unpack uncomfortable, in quotations, topics if a workplace has no politics policy?
Great question, Amanda. Again, I think that we need to advocate for just to like not erase it, but just modify that. Okay, I agree. Maybe it can be, a little, fiery to talk about politics, but it's important to create space to have these honest conversations. I think when we can be more authentic, when we can be more transparent, those things are going to come up. So for us to say, hey, there's this policy where we can't talk about how my kid's life has been affected X, Y, and Z, and it's totally political, or it's totally, and then it's affecting the way that you work, but you have to say like, yeah, I'm okay, can't talk about it. I don't know, maybe I think that that just makes it really cold and really linear. And sure, maybe you'll get the numbers high and you'll get the data high and you'll get all the things high that they want high, but then you're going to be low in the end. And then the product that you're working on building is not going to have your full self and your full emotionally intelligent self participating in that. So my response would be, like I said, change is happening. So maybe a part of the change that we need to see, the wave that we are riding, it's, having these advocating for more space to share, maybe setting your own rules, like this is what happens, just to keep like, what happened to healthy debating? Like we lost that. It's like either a person is right or wrong and that's it. Or, my ideas are the best and yours aren't, and shut up and listen or whatever. It's like, we can philosophize. I think there's the beauty about philosophizing and dreaming and debating. So yeah, that's a part of being grown up.
So thank you so much, Mariella, for this wonderful conversation, or I'm going to borrow your words, this chewy conversation. Yes. So is there any final thoughts that you want to leave us with, right? Or would like for us to take away as we embark on our moment of contemplation, right? Anything that you want to share with us that, that can sit with us. And then the follow-up question to that is, how can we stay connected with you and support the projects that you're working on right now?
Thank you for that. Okay, great. So I also just want to, because I love what is being written here in the chat box. It makes me think of crash test dummies. It makes me think of crash test dummies that were created by white men. And so a lot of products for safety are built on white male body types. Right? That's a great point. Thank you.
Great point.
So to wrap up, basically, I have so much more to share. So hopefully I can come back on another chat and dive deeper, because there's a part that I think is like even more important right now to talk about, which is conscious consumption and conscious production, and how emotional intelligence can, help us be more mindful in the way that we consume, in the way that we produce, in the way that we create. And it all comes back to that self-care, social responsibility, those 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. I just want to say thank you for having me on for the hour. I know this is chewy, like you said, Liang, but don't be afraid of it. Contemplate, journal, practice mindful use of technology. We'll get in on the next chat. We'll get in more, and we'll talk more about like conscious consumption and conscious production. But I would love to invite folks to be a part of the relaunch of the Positive Force team. So next month we are rolling out some new programming so that you can practice emotional intelligence either on your own or with your teams. If you're listening now, if you're joining in now live, or if you're rewatching this, I want to give you all a network discount. So I will give you, I will offer a discount for workshops, discussion groups. Film Club is a part of that. Master classes that we'll be offering with some really brilliant folks, really beautiful minds from Argentina and from the States. And hopefully I'll get more people to be facilitators there. And then you'll get 50% off digital print artwork. So I see that everyone loves artwork, or at least folks who have turned their cameras on. We all got something, we're representing something behind us. And so I believe that emotional intelligence, if we can stimulate our visual senses more and just really dive into conscious production, conscious consumption, and support artists a little more, that will be like a nice little new kind of economy that we're structuring. So you'll get 50% off digital print artwork. And so just go to thepositiveforceteam.org. That is thepositiveforceteam.org, O-R-G. Sign up for the newsletter, and then you can click on me time or team time, depending on if you want to work on your own or if you want to work with your team. Me time or team time, and then that will send an email to me, letting me know that you also, if you can just write also in the email that you join this chat, and I will give you that network discount. So I am not so much on social medias. I'm trying to be more mindful about that. But you can connect with me more on LinkedIn. I'm under Mariella Marie. And then we're going to get Instagram started with the Positive Force team. Just find the Positive Force team there. There are some things that are posted, and I'm just going to work harder to post more so that I can tap into that network as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this. It's such a pleasure always chatting with you, hearing from you, and all of the wisdom that you shared with us. So thank you very much for Mariella. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. And congratulations on your first chat.
I did it. All right. Check, that is over. And thank you to the audience, for joining us and for your engagement and participation, and all the comments and questions have been great. Thank you so much. And Andrea, thank you so much for turning your camera on and showing your face and introducing us to Paint by Numbers. All right. Bye, everybody.